Hello and welcome to the oddschecker betting show, sponsored by Unibet. This is your Grand National preview, day 3, Saturday at Aintree. We'll be going through the card. I'm your host, George Elek, and I'm delighted to be joined by oddschecker's very own Andy Holding and racing journalist and broadcaster Johnny Ward. We've just recorded day 2's preview, so if you're watching this before Friday, make sure you go and check that out first. And we did our pleasantries there. We spoke about the ground and the rest of it. But before we get into the preview, I'm going to ask you both about the Grand National. Johnny, have you had any crazy Saturdays at Aintree in the past?
I've never been to Aintree, so
No
a
way.
lot of people tell me, I've never been to Aintree. I've been to Huntington, met Andy Holding in Huntington there. Yeah, haven't been to Aintree.
Say that Huntington with Andy Holding is very similar to a day at Aintree.
Yeah, certainly we were dressed accordingly anyway. But no, I haven't been to Aintree. I've poor record in the Grand National, although I do remember getting into racing during college, and when Monty's Pass won the National, the owner, I think he owned the bingo hall down the street in Dublin, and all of the old ladies who went to the bingo were on Monty's Pass, all raced down. And I remember not being on Monty's Pass and not having a good week, and wishing I was on Monty's Pass. And then I backed Hedgehunter to win the National 12 months before he won the race when he fell at the last. So yeah, don't have a great record in the race, but it's a hell of a spectacle. It's changed a lot. Come an Irish race now, but yeah, it's not a race that I have a good record in. I'm going to be honest.
Just what all the people tuning into here tips want to hear there, Johnny. You got to make sure you get to Aintree, though. It is, especially Grand National Day. It's a race day like no other. Andy, how's your recent form been? You and I must have been doing this show for about 5 or 6 Grand Nationals now. How have you found it going in recent years?
Yeah, unlike John, it's been probably one of my best betting races in my career. To be, I've had a couple of life-changing results in this race. Number 6 Valverde going back, I think 2005, 2006. I've actually got a painting of him up on my wall. He enabled me to win enough to buy my first decent car. Rule the World followed that up a few years later. Got a nice price and managed to drop on Manila Times a couple of years ago. I've had my hard luck stories along the way. I don't know if you remember a horse called Strands of Gold that Peter Scudamore rode. He was absolutely cantering when he fell second beaches, and my cash went down the drain. And Beau as well was a huge unlucky loser as well, when his reins flipped over the top of his head and Carl Llewellyn couldn't steer him. And there was only about 4 or 5 left in the race at that time, and it was that race where obviously there's only 2 finishers. I'm pretty sure Beau would have won had he not had a huge dollop of bad luck. So good luck and bad luck along the way, but I've always got my ideas about what's the kind of typically a typical horse that wins this race because of a little bit of success in recent times.
Fingers crossed this is another good year then, Andy. And we're going to get onto the Grand National a bit later, the penultimate race on the card. So we're going to go through the rest of the cards. So don't skip ahead, hear what the guys have to say, and we'll get there eventually. But thank you to our sponsors, Unibet, for sponsoring the show. As ever, they're offering more extra place races at Aintree this season than ever before. Every handicap race and plenty others too. So check out the site for that. And they're also offering money back if your horse finishes second or third on at least one race every day. Visit unibet.co.uk to find out more details. We'll start with the opener here. No prices as of yet in the Novice Chase here, where Jonbon is sure to head up the market, and will be a very, very short price to win this one and bounce back from that Cheltenham defeat. And are you surprised to see Jonbon going over 2 miles again, or the extended mile 7?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of a tip in itself for Saint-Roy in the first race on day 1. The fact that they're keeping, or they're allowing him to go up in trip. I felt he should have gone up in trip in the Turners at Cheltenham, but that didn't materialise and they ran them against each other. But look, Jonbon represents the best form line. Al Fabiolo clocked the second fastest time that we've got on the entire meeting. We got an 85 for Galopin Des Champs, 84 for El Fabiolo. No other horse got over 80. I think the Real Wacker was the next nearest, 78. Constitution Hill, 78. So it just shows you what Galopin Des Champs did, but it just shows you what El Fabiolo did. He's going to be a massive player in the Champion Chase next season. I've no doubt about that. I think he's a special talent. And Jonbon was the only one who got anywhere near him. He should be winning this, really. But I do think next season he'll be over 2.5. I think this is their last recognised chance for him to run in a Grade 1 over 2. Yes, of course, still got the pace to win over 2, as he proved when he won last year around this track. So it's no massive negative, but yeah, he should win quite comfortably. I don't see this being a particularly strong race either, unless Banbridge comes here after maybe a mishap on day one, but that's highly unlikely.
I should say that's going to age pretty quickly, given Andy's talking about the opening race on day one when we're about 33 minutes from post time. So we'll see what happens. By the time this goes out, we'll know St. Roy and Banbridge's fate in the first, but we currently do not. Johnny, anything to add on the first, or should we get into the second race on the card?
I just wish Banbridge was running here and not, on the choose to be taking them on Jonbon at the prices. The more I look at Walk in the Park, the more I think a lot of his horses are just a little bit overhyped. He jumped out. He's right at Warwick. He jumped left at Warwick. He jumped right at Cheltenham. He doesn't really look straightforward. He stayed on to get somewhere near El Fabiolo, but again, he was quite well beaten. Maybe they will step him up in trip next season, but I definitely wouldn't be backing him at the prices. I think he probably has a little bit of a hole in him, to be honest, like a lot of Walk in the Parks.
Yeah, I mean, let's get into the one of the races we can preview now with prices, and that is the second race on the card, where we've got the handicap hurdle over 3 miles, where Good Time Johnny is the 11-2 favourite ahead of Mill Green at 8-1, West Balboa and Otoyor also 8-1, Outlaw Peter 9-1, 10-1 Party Business 16-1 bar those. Johnny, how do you see this? We'll give you first run in the second.
First run, I'm going to go with the top horse. I mean, Good Time Johnny. My missus backed him on the basis of my name at Cheltenham. Obviously, I didn't. I mean, how it worked out for Lee McKenna on the day was quite incredible. I mean, this is a horse that had ran over 7 furlongs on the flats last October, and here he is winning over 3 miles at Cheltenham. Tony Martin, to be fair, I know he's not the handicap king anymore. And he's not feared maybe by the bookies as much anymore. But in fairness, his horses have definitely hit form. This horse really scooted up at Cheltenham. If you watch it, I know Lee McKenna got the breaks, but a £5 hike for me is nowhere near enough to stop me from going in again.
Going in again on the Cheltenham winner there, 11-2. Good Time Johnny, the favourite in the handicap hurdle in the second race on the card of Aintree. Andy, it's a shame there's no Good Time Andy in here.
Good Time Andy, yeah. I think Johnny's probably better suited with his name than perhaps anything like that with me. He could certainly drink more than I can, according to form. It was an extraordinary run by Good Time Johnny at Cheltenham. Yeah, I'll back up what Johnny's saying about that horse. I mean, he had no right to win. I think he had one behind him, jumping 2 out, and then he raced on the slowest part of the track when nothing could win. Everything come up the stand rail, and yet he still managed to win going away. So I agree wholeheartedly with the fact that he still felt relatively well treated, but I do think there's a better treated horse in this race, and that's West Balboa, who is off a mark of 135. Now, she was in the mares race at the festival. They took her out at the 5-day deck stage, probably with the view that it was probably one of the hottest mares races ever run, Honeysuckle, Epatante et al. And they didn't have her entered up in any of the Cheltenham Festival handicaps. So it was either going to be a grade 1 or nothing. And yet she's in here off 135, having won the Lanzarote in pretty decisive fashion when we last saw. Now that race really did sort the wheat from the chaff. I was going to say med from the boys, but she
got to be careful these days.
Exactly, yeah. But I mean, there was only 4 finishers. A lot of horses pulled up, tailed off, including horses that have gone on to win subsequently, like Whiz Kid and Outlaw Peter. So I think it was a really good renewal of the Lanzarote, and you needed to be a tough horse to win it, and she proved that in spades. Stepping up in trip, I don't think will be a problem, given the stamina that she showed around Kempton. So if they're thinking she was a grade 1 horse or potentially a grade 1 horse at Cheltenham and didn't run to preserve her mark, that'll do for me. And I did notice that the Skeltons won this with a similarly good horse 3 years ago on Petit Soir. So it's a race that they obviously got a little bit of previous in. So West Balboa for me, I think she's very well handicapped off 135.
West Balboa 8-1 and Good Time Johnny 11-2 there in the second race on Grand National Day. On to the Turner's Mersey Novices Hurdle, where Hermes Allen is the 4-1 favourite ahead of Dark Raven at 9-2. You Wear It Well 5-1, Irish Point 6-1, Springwell Bay 10-1. Let's be clear about it, also 10-1, 12-1, bar those. And for Hermes Allen, Andy, it was one of the more intriguing storylines over the course of the Cheltenham Festival. Punted off the boards, backed all morning, backed on the show, couldn't have been stronger in the market, and then ran a very disappointing race. Comes in here favourite though.
Yeah, I think we were dead against him, weren't we? Based on his shallow form, and the UK horses probably not being as good as the Irish, the novices, and that borne out. I think he finished, was it 5th or 6th in the end, got well beat, but he was beat by a very good horse. I think the Ballymore was a good race this year. I think in Pedro Pass, we're going to be hearing big things of him, perhaps in the 2-mile division at Punchestown, and maybe next season in the Champion Hurdle division, if Constitution Hill goes over fences as predicted. So it probably wasn't that disastrous a run than it feared at first glance. Obviously, this is a recovery mission, and whether you want to take 4-1 to find out is entirely down to personal choice. I think Irish Point represents really good, strong Irish form against the likes of Marine, National and Champ Kiley. He'd probably do for me if I was going to have a bet. I think the ground is crucial to authorise speed. Obviously, Gary Moore's also in great form, but he's very much ground dependent. Looking at the forecast for Saturday, I don't think they're going to get any rain at all at Aintree over the weekend. So if it doesn't rain on Friday, then I think his chances diminish. So yeah, I'm left with Irish Point because I didn't like the way that Dark Raven finished his race off in the Supreme. I don't think he's crying out for 2.5. So I think Hermes Allen is probably on balance of his overall form, other than the Ballymore as the right favourite. But Irish Point represents the best Irish form as far as I could see. And at 6-1, he'll do for me over a trip that he's already proven on.
Irish Point 6-1 with Unibet there for Andy. Johnny?
Yeah, Hermes Allen, I actually think he was slightly knocked at Cheltenham. I didn't think he ran that badly. I think he was back at something like 2.21 running, which must go down as one of the worst bets I've ever seen because they were all stacking up in behind. He ended up beating 21 lengths. It was like, I don't know what race you're watching here.
Yeah.
He's somehow confident enough the horse that hasn't even run against.
It was a bizarre gamble, the whole thing. It was strange.
Bizarre gamble on the day. He let it, obviously, the Mullins horse then sent off second favourite on the day. But anyway, it's his form that ties in, obviously, with Irish Point. And as Andy mentioned, I think that run at Naas in the Lawlers, I wasn't 100% certain he was going to improve the trip. Davy Russell was saying how quick he was at Cork, but he ran very well. I'm also going to put forward, let's be clear about it, I put him up Antibos and Corbett's Cross for oddschecker. I put Corbett's Cross up at 14s for the Albert Bartlett, and let's be clear about it, at 25s or something. And neither of them finished in the frame, obviously. Let's be clear about it. Strictly speaking, was out of the running in 4th. But I thought, considering how free he was, he travelled exceptionally well in the race, and he was quite well backed at the off. So as much as Andy's, ground update to be a little bit of a worry, I think the softer the better for this lad. I think an each way bet on the two of them, or just a couple betting the two of them, won't be too bad here.
So the two of them, let's be clear about it, currently 10-1. And which was the second section?
Irish Point.
And Irish Point, Andy's selection there, 6-1 as well. The two against the field. The 335 is the Liverpool Hurdle, the Grade 1 over an extended 3 miles. And Marie's Rock, another one who, maybe not the market support, but another one of the British horses who didn't live up to expectations at the festival, comes in here as favourite 4-1. Flooring Porter 5-1. Sire Du Berlais 11-2. Andy, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you about Sire Du Berlais in a second. We've managed to avoid it so far. Dashel Drasher 7-1. Champ, I should say, 6-1. Home by the Lee 11-2. Dashel Drasher 7-1. Meet and Greet 8-1. Where it was, it was a Stayers Hurdle, Andy, that was built up and billed as being, one of the best races of the week. And then your selection from the year before goes and wins at an absolutely massive price.
Yeah, when we have Quigley on, he very rarely has a podcast without mentioning Your Darling, and I think we've had many podcasts when I've thrown my cap in the ring with the prospects of Sire Du Berlais, who's been one of my horses that I've followed for the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah, so for him to win the Stayers and me not having a dime on him was a dagger.
Did you even have a tenner at 100 plus on the machine? Oh god.
No. I actually did a preview night with Leona Mayer, and that was a nap of the meeting, believe it or not.
Wow.
She put that up at 50-1 or 66-1. So fair kudos to her for picking that. There was lots of mumblings in the audience when that horse's name was mentioned as a nap of the meeting, but she had the last laugh without shadow of a doubt. But going back to the Stayers, the horse that for me was the best horse in the race and was Heimdall the Lee. Now, obviously, I'm putting a little bit of an asterisk next to this horse's name because of the Jose O'Brien stable form. We get a chance to look at it with Banbridge, with Nusri, and of course with Fake Duderis. So just let's see how those 3 horses end up before this selection is rubber stamped. But he made a horrendous blunder at the one in front of the stands. He was travelling okay, and I think it was his 3rd or 4th. He came out of it probably at least 7 or 8 lengths worse off. He got shuffled back behind Sire Du Berlais. He got shuffled back well behind Flooring Porter. And yet he ended up picking himself off the floor and finishing only 3 lengths behind the winner. He'll definitely turn the form around with Flooring Porter, I've no doubt. Good chance of turning the form around with Sire Du Berlais, and Dashel Drasher are ahead of him. So, yeah, it's only the stable form, really, that would stop me from backing Home by the Lee, who I think will prove himself the horse that he was going to Cheltenham, other than that mistake.
Home by the Lee, 11-2 with Unibet as it stands at this moment. I just gone out 6-1. 6-1. They just heard you, Andy, and they pushed out Home by the Lee. So 6-1 you're getting at the moment.
Yeah, given my current form, that's probably not a bad shout. Push anything out that I fancy.
Johnny, who do you fancy for this?
Yeah, so Home by the Lee, I thought it was an absolutely extraordinary performance. I put him up for oddschecker anti-post, and I honestly was imploring JJ7 to pull him up, and as an animal rights issue when he made that mistake that Andy's talking about. I was like, you can't ask a horse to keep going. And then I'd sort of forgotten about him jump the last. And next thing you're looking up the hill, and he's running on again. To be beaten by just over 3 lengths in that race was an extraordinary performance. Now, if you're backing a horse if you're opposing a horse who had hard race at Cheltenham, it's hard to imagine a horse having a harder race than that. Whereas Andy said he must have lost at least half a dozen lengths, and he would have beaten all these. He's a strong stayer. I can't see how he's not favourite for this race. I really can't. As Andy says, maybe the yard form's a slight concern, but in general, Joseph's having a very good year with the season with his jumpers, so he'll definitely do for me.
Home by the Lee, 6-1. The selection for both the guys there, a strong one there. In the 3:35, the Liverpool Hurdle. On to the 4:15 now, the race before the Grand National. It is the handicap chase over 3 miles, and we have got, if I can get the page up, I can. Nasalam is the 5-1 favourite. Ahead of Midnight River at 11-2. Eldorado Allen is 6-1. Shake 'em Up Harry and Beauport both 7-1. 12-1 Kanodu Kwetu and Coconut Splash 14-1 Bardos. Unibet paying a fifth of 4. Johnny.
This race I found very, very difficult. Obviously the Irish representatives are few and far between. Hansworth, if he actually jumped, he wouldn't be without a chance. It can be a little bit of an issue for him, but he's coming in off bottom weight, and you got to remember he's run very well at Aintree in the past. He's a massive, massive price. I am fascinated by Philip Dempsey coming over here. The last day at Navan was very testing ground, but that wouldn't have been his trip, to be fair. He finished 3rd. You will note as well, Gain de Cause was 4th. Quite well beaten by him, 5 lengths behind him. Ended up winning well since for Tony Martin. So as much as he's out of the handicap and so forth, I actually think he could run well here. It's a very, very tough race for me.
Tough race there for Johnny. Andy, how do you see it?
Yeah, again, another ground dependent selection, really. If the forecast is right for Saturday and it does dry out, which I think it probably will, given there's no rain, I think Kanodu Kwetu is definitely worth a mention. They ran him in the Reynolstown last time out, probably with the view to thinking, well, we don't really know what kind of horse we've got, and it looked like cutting up the Ascot race. Unfortunately, the ground went soft, and he was very ineffective. He's since had a wind operation to suggest that maybe other forces are at play that day, but he loves good ground, and he loves it here at Aintree. He won here early on in the season very easily when he was rising through the ranks, and being as he's the only course and distance winner as far as I could see, if the wind operation has worked, then at 12-1, he's got a decent chance. But again, I'm just pointing out that he would need good ground or good to soft ground at worst.
So Kanodu Kwetu, 12-1, but ground dependent, to keep an eye on that rain before you pull the trigger there. The Grand National now, it is the big one, the one that probably people are tuning in to see or hear your guys' thoughts on. Corach Rambler, another Cheltenham Festival hero for Lucinda Russell. And Derek Fox is jocked up 13-2, favourite ahead of Delta Work at 8-1. Last year's winner Noble Yeats 17-2. Gaillard de Mesnil 12-1. Lamilos 12-1. Mr. Incredible 12-1. Any Second Now and Longhouse Poet 14s. Ain't That a Shame 14-1. The Big Dog and Capadano and Vanillier all 16-1. Galvin 18-1. Our Power 18-1. 25-1 bar those. And Andy, before we get the big reveal of your selection or selections, what is it this year that you're really looking to prioritise when picking your Grand National horse?
Well, in years gone by, I've usually gone for fairly unexposed horses or second season novices that have obviously been targeted at the race and kept fresh. They don't necessarily fall into every criteria this year, but I do think horses that have got low mileage tend to do really well. Noble Yeats, for instance, last year he was a 7-year-old, and ordinarily you wouldn't normally touch a 7-year-old, but Emmett Mullins obviously broke the mould last year. So if you fancy a 7-year-old like I do, a couple this year, that I don't think that's necessarily a negative. The dynamics of the race have obviously changed. It's not so quite demanding as it used to be, and not much emphasis or less emphasis on jumping as it was. Just think you need something that's a copper bottom stayer. So Corach Rambler's my number one choice. I put this on anti-post on my column a week after the weights were revealed. Lo and behold, he went and won at Cheltenham, which was a bonus. I don't necessarily think that was the be-all and end-all, because he hadn't run since November. They were very much looking to target that race as a run to bring him on, but the fact that he won was great. And I just love the way he won that day. I mean, he came from a long way back, jumped fantastically well, as he often does. I think the problem that Derek Fox is going to have, necessarily if he does get him round, is when to time his challenge. It's a good problem to have, isn't it? When you've got to think about when do I pick the runners up. But that long running, as we've seen with him before, he can sort of like have a little bit of a look around at the crowd. So he'll be looking to do a little bit of a mini homer with him and perhaps produce him late. I'm a big fan of Mr. Incredible, even though he's got his quirks. Good run in the Warwick race over 3.5, suggesting that marathon trips will suit. And he came from a long way back to run really well in the Kinmure. I think he was an above average renewal of the Kinmure this year. And if he plays ball, consents to play ball, I do think he's quite well treated. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 now, like a lot of the tipsters do in the paper. So there's my number one. There's my number two. There's my 1 and 2. My third would be Galliard de Mesnil, proven grade one horse. Similar to Rule of the World was a few years ago, to having running all those big grade ones. Proven over the trip, or near to the trip, winning at 3-6. Great running last year's Irish Nationals as a novice. And obviously represents Willie Mullins, who's won it numerous times and also in great form. And the fourth choice would be the top weight any second now. He's almost sure to get round, barring miracles. Stays really well, run up in this race before. And I think, again, it's hard to not see him running well, just because he ticks hell of a lot of boxes. So there we go. There's my 1, 2, 3, 4. Corach Rambler, Mr. Incredible, Galliard de Mesnil, any second now.
13-2, Corach Rambler, Mr. Incredible 12-1, Galliard de Mesnil 12-1, any second now 14-1. Unibet paying 6 places as it stands at the time of recording, a 5th to 6th. There are Andy's 4 selections in this year's Grand National. Johnny, how many you got for us?
I'll give 2 or 3. I'm not massively a fan of Jeremy horses in over extreme staying trips as a general rule, and I'm going to put up the other Jeremy horse in the race. Corach Rambler is one, and Ain't That a Shame is the other. So one of us hopefully will win. Texted Henry de Bromhead. He said he's hopeful about the trip. It is a concern for me. I mean, when this horse ran at Leopardstown at Christmas over 3 miles, he looked like he was going to win. He ended up finishing 4th. But I do think he's been laid out for this race. The form of his race at Gorn, he hammered Max Charm, and Max Charm won easily off 135. He is running off his Irish mark, and he is 10 stone 5. So there are positives in that regard. He travels and jumps really well. He loved the ground. Richard Black won the race 2 years ago for Henry de Bromhead. 4 of Henry's last 12 runners have fallen, which would be a little bit of a concern. But in general, I wouldn't be too worried about that. He'd go Cheltenham, and I do like his chance if he can last it out. Others, I'd be with Andy and Mr. Incredible. I really like his angle in the race. I think if he can get into a rhythm, and obviously if he consents, and in general, he's been quite good. He was unlucky at Leopardstown, but other than that, he's done nothing wrong. I think he's going to run well, and I'm actually going to mention Noble Yeats. I know he's gone up hugely since he won the race last year. He was 147. He's now 166. But Jonbon is riding him. He did run well at Cheltenham. And to be fair to the horse, he was very like the race going into the race last year. Probably a better horse now. Enough, Ain't That a Shame has actually raced less now going into the race than Noble Yeats 12 months ago. So I'm going to go with an Irish 1, 2, 3 in that order.
Irish 1, 2, 3. Ain't That a Shame 14-1. Mr. Incredible 12-1, and Noble Yeats 17-2. So 6 horses between the two of you. Double selection, Mr. Incredible. Plenty of chances there to go into the Grand National with. It should be, as ever, one of the highlights of the sporting calendar come 5:15 on Saturday afternoon. The final race on the card, we don't have any prices for. It is the bumper. And rather than running through, we've got how many? 20 declared. Andy, any of these catching your eye before we see any prices?
Yeah, as it were, one from the top, one from the bottom in traditional countdown fashion. One Irish and one UK horse. I think will be a big prize. I love Blizzard of Oz. He got beat by Captain Cody at Limerick 2 runs ago, and Captain Cody flew the flag for that race with distinction at the Cheltenham Festival. But he absolutely bolted up last time out. I really like him. Nice, big, powerful looking gelding that I think we're going to hear plenty of good things about in the next year or two. And the other one is a bit of a sneaky one, Florida Dreams, trained by Nicky Richards. It's about time that the Northern Scene had a really good bumper horse, and I was massively impressed with the way this horse won at Musselburgh. He looked in trouble 2 out, but he didn't have quicking in the latter stage. He pulled well clear of a race that's worked out really well. His time figure was good, and he's been saved specifically for this race ever since. So those would be my 2 against the field: Blizzard of Oz and Florida Dreams.
Yeah, no prices as of yet, but those are the 2 to put in the notebook from Andy. Johnny, anything to add?
Yeah, it's a tentative one. Blizzard of Oz, for me, the one thing I'd be worried about was he just so impressive on that ground the last year? Because for me, it was a bit of a revelation, and maybe he quite needs that ground. Andy was the weather on Saturday. I think it probably won't be. It'll be edging more towards sort of spring summer ground at this stage, which will suit Samui, who's a horse by Sayuni, who absolutely bolted up in the end at Naas. He's a 4-year-old that Gordon is sending over, which I think is quite interesting for an inexperienced horse with a big future. And I'm not sure what he achieved in the context of this race, but he only really started getting going late on in the race. He's a really well bred horse, flat pedigree. This horse, I just think the ground is going to suit him better. Gordon's other horse in the race, if I find it here, I think Pour Les Filles, I think might have been owned or bred by Davy Russell, if I remember rightly. There's definitely a Davy Russell connection to that, I think. But in any event, he does have 2 runners, as does Willie. I'm going to go with Samui, who I think could be a big price here on the basis of riding arrangements.
Samui there, the one for Johnny in the bumper. That brings our Aintree Grand National Day 3 at the Grand National Festival preview to a close. Thank you very much to Unibet for sponsoring the show. Make sure you check out unibet.co.uk. They are paying extra places and more races than ever at Aintree this year, including all the handicaps and others there too. And money back if your horse finishes 2nd or 3rd on at least one race every day. So check out unibet.co.uk there. Make sure you subscribe to the Oddschecker YouTube channel, where you can find all the Oddschecker betting shows most weeks, I should say, with myself and normally Andy and Johnny there as well, previewing the weekend's racing. Enjoy the racing. Thank you very much to Johnny and to Andy for sharing their tips and insight. We'll be back again very, very soon. But in the meantime, have a great weekend, have a great Grand National, and please do ensure that you're gambling responsibly.